Over the course of the next half hour, some of the images that we are about to show you could be disturbing. We urge viewer discretion. We are getting you the latest from Afghanistan after US pullout. Now, with the United States pulling out of Afghanistan after 20 long years, the Taliban is now completely in control and is learned to have unleashed brutality that you may not even have thought of. On your screens right now are images of a man hanging from a US helicopter hovering over Kandahar. Now remember, Taliban have acquired a number of US Black Hawks after the United States and the Afghanistan National Army and Air Force left. Now this is just one of the glimpses of mayhem unleashed by Taliban. Now local reports seem to indicate that the Taliban is punishing those who had supported the Afghan National Army and the United States, but we await independent confirmation. Shortly after taking control of Kabul airport, the Taliban were caught on camera firing celebratory shots in the air. There were visuals of Taliban's soldiers of the 313 Badri Brigade taking over the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. Now, the last date for withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan was the 31st of August, but close to midnight on the 30th, Major General Chris Donahue of the 82nd Airborne Division became the last US soldier to pull out of Afghanistan after 20 long years. So the Taliban are now completely in control of Afghanistan, of course, barring the Panjshir Valley. There are reports of Taliban's brutality already making headlines. There are reports of 14 people belonging to Afghanistan's minority Hazara community being shot dead by Taliban. 12 soldiers and 2 civilians were murdered according to reports, and the 12 soldiers had surrendered to the Taliban. According to reports emerging from Afghanistan, this incident has taken place in the Khadir district of Daikundi province of Afghanistan. The brutal killings come just a month after shockingly similar incident in the Ghazni province in early July. According to human rights group Amnesty International, the Taliban had tortured and killed 9 men who belonged to the Hazara minority community and looted their homes at that time. Now, according to eyewitnesses, 6 Hazara men were shot dead. 3 of them had been tortured to death. The Hazara community is Afghanistan's 3rd largest ethnic group, which comprises Shia Muslims, or those who practice this form of Islam. So Taliban are now completely in control of the Hamid Karzai International Airport after the last US C-17 Globemaster pulled out close to midnight. And when you look at these images, these are Taliban fighters. They're driving into the Hamid Karzai International Airport, the civilian side and the military side. All of this now in control of the Taliban. Now, some of these units, the 313 Badri Brigade or Badri Battalion of the Taliban, is equipped by looted American equipment, boots and body armor. And they were seen taking control of the tarmac of the Hamid Karzai International Airport. Now, top Taliban commanders, including their chief spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid and, of course, Anas Haqqani, are now in Kabul. They visited the Hamid Karzai International Airport and talked about taking control of the country. Very symbolic in terms of a US C-130. There you see a US Air Force C-130J Hercules in the backdrop. Americans, we are told, they disabled, they demilitarized scores of aircraft and armored vehicles, including high-tech rocket defense systems at the Kabul airport before they left. Kabul airport was on the globe's watch for the past 2 weeks. It was the only way out of this war-torn country. Thousands of Afghans were at the airport, some falling to their death after desperately hanging on to the C-17 Globemaster military aircraft in a desperate attempt to flee Afghanistan. Last week, Islamic State launched a suicide attack near the Abbey Gate of the airport, which killed 170 Afghans and 13 US servicemen. So, soldiers of the Badri 313 Brigade or Battalion say that their main effort is to try and revive these choppers. These images that you see on your television screen are choppers destroyed by the US Air Force, by the US Marines before they left Afghanistan. And they say that these Hepters, these warbirds, are no longer airworthy. In some instances, and of course these are reports that are coming in that seem to say that grenades were hurled inside, avionic parts or various components, they were taken out of these helicopters. Can they be made airworthy again by the Taliban? Do they have the wherewithal? Do they know how to service and maintain these aircraft? That remains a big challenge as far as Taliban and their backers in Pakistan are concerned. Well, India Today is the only channel that has been getting you ground reports from Ground Zero, Afghanistan. Izzatullah Ahmadzai went inside the Kabul airport where American choppers have been left behind. Now, Americans insist that military equipment has been demilitarized, is not airworthy. He brings us this report.
अगर कोई परवाज़ हो जाएंगे, लेकिन तालिबानों का कहने पर अभी तक कोई परवाज़ नहीं.
So what are the weapons, what are the systems? According to former US President Donald Trump, Taliban are now in control of weapons and systems worth more than $85 billion, by some accounts $89 billion that has been spent in Afghanistan in the past 2 decades. Now, what are these weapons and systems? Let's take them one by one. Combat aircraft. Now, earlier, Taliban didn't have any combat aircraft, but now they have Super Tucano light attack aircraft. That's point one. Point two, helicopters. Did they have helicopters earlier? No, the Taliban did not have helicopters earlier. Now they have Mi-17s. Again, the Americans insist that the Mi-17 helicopters are no longer airworthy. What does that mean? Well, in some instances, if we were to talk about the Mi-24 attack helicopters, in some cases, the rotors have been removed. In some other instances, there are other steps that have been taken in terms of removing components of the aircraft, ensuring that these are no longer airworthy. But these weapons extremely dangerous. Earlier, the Taliban had access to AK series assault rifles. Now they have the M4s, A1s, they have the M16s. They have latest modern rifles which have better firepower, better accuracy. Let's also talk about some of the other weapons. For example, earlier, yes, they did have light machine guns, but now they have American M240 machine guns. They have modern, they have access to modern weapons. Let's move forward. Let's talk about other utility vehicles. So what did Taliban use earlier? They have the Toyota pickup trucks. What do they have access to now? They have access to Humvees. Now, these are armor-plated vehicles. These are vehicles that they can use and move in even when they're in the line of fire. MPVs or mine-protected vehicles. Earlier they had none. Now they have Max Pro MPVs. Now these are very sophisticated American MPVs that can actually go through light IED blasts that can actually keep the Taliban safe. Drones. The Taliban did not have unmanned aerial vehicles earlier. Now they have Scan Eagle surveillance drones, which means on the move they can keep an eye over the hill on what the adversary is doing. And in this case, as of now, it is the Panjshir Valley and the resistance. Artillery. They had access to old Russian artillery, Grad rockets, for example. Now they have access to light field guns. They have access to 155 howitzers, light American howitzers, battle tanks. The Taliban, at one point of time, they did operate the vintage T-62 tanks, but now they have access to tanks that was in the armory of the Afghanistan Army or Afghanistan National Defense Forces. As Taliban took control of the Kabul airport, they took the opportunity to boast about their control. So, Taliban leaders were flanked by, look at these men on your television screen, the Badri 313 unit. They walked across the tarmac. What is this Badri 313 unit? Here is all that you need to know.
When you think of the Taliban, you think of that stereotypical terrorist.
Ominous gunfire ringing out at the Kabul airport.
Posed inside Kabul's presidential palace. But the Taliban's muscle has another side to it. What you're looking at is the Badri 313 battalion, a special commando-style unit that is securing the Taliban's hold over Kabul and other parts of Afghanistan. As the Taliban took over the presidential palace, the Badri 313 fanned out across Kabul, keeping a hawk's eye on any reprisals. And in case you hadn't noticed, the Badri 313 looks like any modern special forces unit. Take a close look at this image of the unit. Observe how well equipped the soldiers are. Apart from that big Taliban flag they're wielding, the Badri 313 soldiers wield modern assault rifles, modern firearms, updated combat clothing including protective vests and pads, and even night vision optical devices attached to their combat helmets. While training and tactics are definitely everything, a cursory look at the Badri 313 in comparison to Indian and Pakistani special forces shows that they definitely look at least geared for the part. Earlier comprised of a mix of militant groups, the Badri 313 now operates with the Taliban. The name of the unit originates from the Battle of Badr, in which Muhammad led a victorious army of 313 men. Indoctrinated with the Taliban's brand of militant Islam, with a name that harks back to an ancient religious war, but kitted out for the modern battlefield. The Badri 313 train like any commando unit, with all manner of tactical, storming and attack training conducted at undisclosed locations in the hinterland. The high-quality images released on social media by the Badri 313 last week also appear pointed at serving a purpose. Experts believe it could be the Taliban sending out a signal that they aren't a ragtag movement of farmers and shepherds who live by stealing weapons, but have embraced modern military methods, even special forces operation tactics. The Badri 313 unit has already begun to secure Kabul and other areas, imposing the will of the Taliban. With the Taliban now in power, there's every reason to believe that the militia could grow in strength. Expect to see much more of the Badri 313 in the weeks and months ahead. Bureau Report, India Today.
And after spending 2 decades in Afghanistan, the United States, they finally completed their withdrawal, ending America's longest war. The last US military plane took off the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul late last night. And Major General Chris Donahue, the commander of the 82nd Airborne, was the last soldier to board that aircraft.
Ominous gunfire ringing out at the Kabul airport. The Taliban celebrating the last of US troops leaving at the dead of night. Opening fire from automatic weapons after storming the airport. Moments earlier, the last US evacuation flight had taken off, ending the 20-year-old US military presence on Afghan soil. Major General Chris Donahue was the last US soldier to leave Kabul in a C-17 jet. US night vision camera photo from inside the Globemaster capturing the haunting yet iconic moment. Photos of the last batch of US men evacuating showed largely empty barracks at the airport.
We're here right now with the Taliban as they enter into what was only minutes ago, it was an American-controlled portion of the military airport. Now they're taking over.
The US air machines and tanks were found abandoned. Many deliberately wrecked by departing US troops in order to stop the Taliban from using them.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. The last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 30th, this afternoon, at 3:29 p.m. East Coast time.
The pullout ending a hasty and humiliating retreat 1 minute before midnight Kabul time on Monday, a full day before the 31st August troop pullout deadline could end, leaving behind hundreds of US citizens and abandoning thousands of Afghan allies possibly eligible for airlift. Gone, it's the end of the longest US war in history. It may also be curtains for freedom, for liberty and for women's rights under Taliban rule. Bureau Report, India Today.
And India Today's Foreign Affairs editor GEETA Mohan now joins me for more on this big story. GEETA, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, mentioned some 200, under 200, more than 100 Americans still in Afghanistan. Why wasn't America able to evacuate them? What's the plan to evacuate them? And what about Indians who are still in Afghanistan?
Well, there are only around 20 Indians, Gaurav, who are still in Afghanistan. For India, the Herculean task is to ensure that they reach the Kabul airport from where the evacuation is going to take place. For America, there are alternate routes because not every American who's in a far-flung area or not in Kabul would be able to really reach Kabul airport. So they are looking at other options, which is taking help from Pakistan. There could be some airlifting that could happen from those areas to Pakistan and then flying out of there. So we do know that the American forces have more allies or more partners who they can really work with. For India, even those 20 and getting those Afghan Hindus and Sikhs who want to leave the country out of Afghanistan is going to be a real task because they have to reach Kabul airport. This even as America, after the last flight out, declared in no time declared that the Kabul airport is uncontrollable, which means that it is not under anybody's control. We do not know who is taking care of the air traffic right now. But because they gave up control, there is no specific information or notice as to who one can coordinate with in Afghanistan to ensure that the flights now start smoothly. Meanwhile, we know that the Indian administration, and like we've been reporting, Gaurav, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has constituted a high-level group with External Affairs Minister and National Security Advisor both as part of that group. We will be looking at how those 20 of them would be evacuated. President Biden is going to hold or address the nation once the touchdown happens in America. That's going to be around 11 p.m. here in India. And he is facing a lot of criticism regarding the evacuation, the fact that it did not take place in time. And like you have been saying, Gaurav, leaving Bagram before completing evacuation, one of the biggest disasters, so to say. But then again, we'll again have to wait and see what the president's response to these queries are really going to be.
Oh, absolutely. What's also extremely interesting at this point of time, that the American aircraft that took over, a number of American soldiers have landed in Pakistan. And GEETA, this is quite contrary to news that was coming from Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's office. I mean, he said it's shackles of slavery that Afghanistan has been able to break away from. And suddenly we see all these Americans in Pakistan. So are they there in Islamabad or Karachi for a short haul? Are they likely to be there for a longer haul? And some of the drone strikes that are taking place, are drones still taking off from Pakistan?
Well, the forces that have left Afghanistan or those who are now landing in Pakistan, certainly short haul, because there is going to be no long haul with Pakistan till there is a decision, a policy decision by the Imran Khan administration or specifically by Rawalpindi, Gaurav, to have them there. But America is not giving up on the region. There are many bases that America still has its forces in, and they are looking very keenly and watching very closely as to what is really happening in Afghanistan. As for Pakistan, Gaurav, they can smile gleefully all they want. Once they have the bigger crisis, that's the refugee crisis with 7 to 10 million Afghans trying to enter Pakistan, then we will talk about inclusivity, which is what the world is talking about right now. And you see there is a change in the tone and tenor of statements that are coming in from Pakistan now. They are talking about inclusivity because if the Taliban regime is not inclusive, then the ones who are not included will be going into Pakistan.
Oh, absolutely. And also the financial crisis, the problems that are arising. Geeta, stay with me for a moment because let's now focus on what's happening in Afghanistan. Now, foreign aid, that will only come to Talibanistan in case Taliban lives up to the promises it's made to the world. And so far, some of the indications are that it's not living up to those promises, especially Al-Qaeda elements who are making their way back into Afghanistan. But the second aspect, hunger, poverty, chaos, banks, will they get foreign aid for all of this? Incidentally, Afghanistan is also looking at India for 150,000 metric tons of wheat. And will India give that unless the red lines that have been given by India and certain other countries are respected and adhered to? Take a look at this report.
For the US, it's curtains on a 20-year-long war in foreign land. But for Taliban, it is a new beginning. And they are down to business.
God willing, we will try to establish a safe atmosphere in all the provinces of Afghanistan so that the people do not worry and do not fear the Mujahideen, because they are our brothers and we protect them, and together with them we will build the homeland.
Despite these assurances, across the country, the situation is nowhere near normal. In Kabul, these are the frantic scenes. People reaching out for bags of food handed out by social workers. Desperate lines outside ATMs ahead of full-fledged Taliban rule. There are fears of restrictions on cash withdrawal by the Central Bank of Afghanistan. The country's economy that was fully dependent on foreign aid is now virtually decimated. Not just a financial crisis, a medical crisis also looms large.
The fact that, as you may know, the whole health system in Afghanistan was supported from outside, foreign aid, mainly the World Bank, the EU, and some other donors. And as you may know, the World Bank, but also the IMF and some others, froze the funds for Afghanistan. And one of the great risks for the health system here is basically to collapse because of lack of support.
Following the US troop pullout under a new Taliban regime, Afghanistan is staring at uncertain future on all fronts: social, political, and economic. The war-hardened citizens would hope they can survive this upheaval too. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, Afghanistan's last free province, Panjshir, it continues to resist the Taliban. The reports that are emerging seem to indicate that Taliban have blown up a bridge near the Panjshir Strait. Now, there is a fierce face-off between Taliban and the resistance forces that's taking place on the northeast flank. Now, according to Ahmad Masood's aide, Fahim Dasti, the resistance claims at least 30 Taliban fighters have been killed by the resistance group. 15 others are wounded. Now, according to top resistance leaders, including Fahim Dasti, several Taliban fighters are also now in the custody of the resistance forces. Afghanistan's caretaker President Amrullah Saleh has refused to surrender to the Taliban amidst talks with the resistance front. Amrullah Saleh has called upon the global community to stand up for the right cause, maintaining that the Western community has a lot to lose The caretaker president insists he will not surrender to Taliban.
From last night, Taliban are running an offensive in the northeast of Panjshir through the high pass of Khawak. So far, there were 3 major offensives by Taliban, which was pushed back by the forces of the NRFA. Lots of casualties from Taliban side, at least 30 killed, around 15 wounded, and a few have been captured. Also, there was some military equipment which was captured by our forces, but the war is going on, and our forces are fully prepared.
India says it is committed to evacuating stranded Afghan minorities who may want to leave the country after Taliban's takeover. Sources say Prime Minister Narendra Modi has directed a high-level group comprising the External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and senior officials to focus immediately on the priorities for India. Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla said India always provided strong support to minority communities like Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan, adding that it's an important part of New Delhi's effort to evacuate Afghan nationals, and more than 800 people had been evacuated from Afghanistan and brought to India since the 16th of August when the first group was airlifted. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council under India's presidency adopted a strong resolution seeking that Afghanistan's soil should not be used for terrorist activities and that minority rights are respected, and those who want to leave Afghanistan have access to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. Now, former Pakistan cricketer Shahid Afridi has expressed his love for Taliban. He said Taliban have come with a positive mind and they have allowed women to work. He also said Taliban like cricket a lot. Listen in to Shahid Afridi praising Pakistan. Incidentally, the Pakistani cricketer had earlier not just made anti-India remarks over Kashmir, but also claimed in a television interview in Pakistan that he broke a television set in his house after his little daughter was watching Aarti on a Hindi television serial and imitated it.